Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, I'm Andrew McDermott, and this is a Wee Yin, a shorter episode of Simply Scottish. Our Wee Yins can give you a quick Scottish fix wherever your day takes you. Today, a profile of Scottish-Canadian writer Lucy Maud Montgomery, author of the beloved children's novel Anne of Green Gables. We'll take a brief look at the experiences that led her to write her memorable story. We'll also look at the Scottish and indeed spiritual roots of the sport of basketball by profiling Mr. James Naismith. Our opening music today comes from Maeve Mackinnon. This song is called My Love Left on a Ferry. Let's enjoy more of it now. My mission with Simply Scottish is to build an educated, passionate community of Scotland lovers around the world that is dedicated to promoting Scotland's interests and living out the Scottish qualities of friendship, perseverance, and industry. If that's you, then welcome, and please do keep in touch with me and other Simply Scottish listeners. Follow the show on Facebook and Twitter, and email me at andrew@simplyscottish.com to tell me where you're listening from and what your connection is to Scotland. That's andrew@simplyscottish.com. I want to thank a few listeners who have reached out to me recently. I heard from Juliana in Massachusetts, who recently found the podcast when researching the history of the Scottish Covenanters, the subject of one of our recent episodes. She said she was delighted to find so many episodes covering a wide variety of topics related to the Scots and the Scottish diaspora. Juliana shared with me some information about a lumber mill in Berwick, Maine, where Scottish prisoners of war were sent by Oliver Cromwell as indentured servants after the battles of Dunbar and Worcester in the 1650s. Many of those banished were Covenanters, exiled from their homeland during their long struggle for religious freedom in Scotland. Very interesting stuff. Juliana has also discovered some of the other work I do when I'm not discussing all things Scottish. In my role as a senior fellow at the Discovery Institute, I write and podcast about technology, education, and American history. A great place to find some of the other work I do is at my personal website, andrewmcdermott.org. Juliana, thanks for making contact, and I hope you make it to Scotland in the near future. Also, a quick thank you to the folks who produce the Scottish Banner, a popular international newspaper for the Scottish community in Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and the US. They kindly reprinted in their April 2022 issue my article on Robert Burns and whether he can save us from another civil war. If you haven't read that yet, give it a go. I've linked to it on the front page of simplyscottish.com, so you can check it out there. In the early 1960s, songwriters Robert and Richard Sherman wrote a song that would become a global calling card for the Walt Disney Company. It's a Small World After All. The song's message of peace and unity was a hit with Disney's founder, as well as the millions around the world who have heard the song since. Soon after this, a scientific theory began to gain traction, known as 6 degrees of separation, the idea that any two people in the world are connected to each other with an average of 6 degrees or less. In my writing and podcasting over the last handful of years, I've been using that theory to demonstrate the strength and reach of Scotland's global influence. Can any person, past or present, or even any object or place, be connected to Scotland in 6 or less steps? In other episodes in the 6 Degrees of Scotland series, we've explored several prominent Americans with Scottish roots, including Ronald Reagan, Reese Witherspoon, Uncle Sam, Thomas Jefferson, and Judy Garland. We've also looked at some prominent Canadians of Scottish blood who helped build the nation of Canada. Today we continue that trend with a look at 2 more Scottish Canadians and their lasting contributions. By the 1860s, the fur trade, Canada's first large-scale commerce industry, was dwindling. Another wave of Scottish immigrants had recently landed in Canada, and among them were the grandparents of James Naismith. Born in 1861, Naismith is a fine example of Scottish inventiveness and tenacity. Most well known as the inventor of the game of basketball, he was also an accomplished teacher, physician, minister, and athlete. He embodies well the typical Scottish trait of overcoming adversity with creativity and good humour. As a child, Naismith preferred engaging in physical activities like games and hunting over his academic studies. At McGill University in Montreal, he earned medals in gymnastics and earned a degree in physical education. He also studied theology at Presbyterian College. During this time, he developed a passion for helping other young men through athletics. In 1891, while teaching at the YMCA International Training School in Massachusetts, Naismith was asked by his director to create an indoor game that would keep his PE students safely in shape during a particularly hard winter. Naismith developed basketball, utilizing a softer, larger ball, overhead goals, and limited running on the court. The sport was a hit, soon spreading to other YMCA locations around the world. It was featured as a demonstration sport at the 1904 Olympic Games in St. Louis, and by 1936 it was adopted as an official Olympic sport. Until his death in 1939, Naismith continued to mentor youth by combining his training in ministry with his passion for athletics. We'll have more in a few minutes. Right now, here's music from Megan Henderson. It's the Dawn Chorus from debut album Pilgrim Souls. You're listening to Simply Scottish. Another Scots-descended Canadian who brought Canada to life on the page was Lucy Maud Montgomery. She was born and grew up on Prince Edward Island, part of a rural Scottish community built by 3 generations of her ancestors. She began writing early, no doubt influenced by the Scottish tradition of oral storytelling, as well as stories from the Bible and from authors of her day. After completing university, she taught at local schools until she could afford to write for a living. Her major break came in 1908 when she published Anne of Green Gables. The book tells the story of an orphan girl who makes the best of her accidental adoption to a farming family on Prince Edward Island. It was an international bestseller. Readers fell in love with the spunky, tenacious main character and the Scottish-style nostalgia of a simpler, more wholesome, pre-industrial way of life. Montgomery wrote 7 sequels to Anne of Green Gables, as well as other novels featuring young girl characters. She also composed other standalone novels, hundreds of poems, and reams of journals. At times, the joy she brought to her readers eluded her, as she suffered from depression as an adult. Today, Montgomery's legacy lies in the characters and places she brought to life. Thousands travel to a green-gabled Victorian farmhouse on Prince Edward Island each year to relive her most famous stories. Her first book about Anne is consistently rated a top children's book of all time, and both kids and adults still enjoy it all over the world today, as well as movie versions of her stories. Millions in America and around the world have connections to Scotland. It's often a link that, once discovered, is immediately cherished. Is everyone and everything tied to Scotland in some way? That remains to be seen, but we're exploring that cheeky possibility. Look for previous episodes of our 6 Degrees of Scotland series on your podcast platform of choice. And by the way, if you have access to the Apple Podcasts app on a smartphone or computer, would you consider leaving the podcast a rating and written review there? That always helps in the search for new listeners and to maintain exposure in one of the world's largest podcast directories. Don't forget, though, you can reach me anytime at andrew@simplyscottish.com. And I'm hoping to release something new on the podcast every month. That is my goal. I haven't always been able to do that in years past just because of a growing family and demands at work. But I sure am blessed to be connected to you in the name of Scotland, and I hope I can continue to produce and release episodes that you will enjoy. Well, let's part for the moment and connect again soon. And as is my custom, let me say goodbye with music. This is a brand new song from Scottish traditional musician Sarah Markey. From her upcoming album, this is Off She Jumped. I'm Andrew McDermott for Simply Scottish. Cheers.
Simply Scottish is hosted and produced by Andrew McDermott. Show content, copyright, Simply Scottish Media. All music is used with consent of copyright holders. Continue your Simply Scottish experience at simplyscottish.com. Thanks for listening.